so much of what we want to accomplish, so much of what we want to do in this movement in this country, I think are fundamentally dependent on going through a set of very hostile institutions, specifically the universities, which control the knowledge in our society, which control what we call truth and what we call falsity, that provides research that gives credibility to some of the most ridiculous ideas that exist in our country. And so I'm excited to close this conference with this particular set of remarks, because I think if any of us want to do the things that we want to do for our country and for the people who live in it, we have to honestly and aggressively attack the universities in this country. Now, I am, as of July of this year, a Senate candidate in the state of Ohio, which is a very unique situation for me to be in. Thank you. You can all go to jdvance.com and make yourselves as poor as possible to support my campaign. But, you know, one of the things that consistently comes up in my campaign, because I was one of these people who didn't quite get Donald Trump in the beginning, I didn't sort of fully appreciate where he was coming from or what he was about, and now I very much do, is this concept of red pilling. And if you ever heard this term, it comes from the movie The Matrix, which, as I understand it, is made by a couple of people who do not share the politics of the people in this room. But the basic idea is that once you see the way that knowledge is transmitted, once you see the way that public policy works in this country, it's very hard to unsee it. And so there's this scene in the movie The Matrix where the chief protagonist is given an opportunity to take the blue pill or the red pill. And he takes the red pill. And the red pill effectively reveals to him the fundamental corruption that laid at the heart of the society that he lived in. And I'm going to come back to this analogy later on in my remarks, but I think it's important to understand that so much of what's going on in our country, so much of what drives truth and knowledge as we understand it in this country is fundamentally determined by, supported by, and reinforced by the universities in this country. That is the world that we live in. We live in a world that has been made effectively by university knowledge. And if you ask yourself, why have we consented to this? Why have we accepted a world in which the universities, which by the way are not exactly politically sympathetic with any of the people in this room, why have we done that? A pogrom started on social media. The guy was turned into the great Satan. And I have to bring out my phone here to remember the exact thing that was said here. About a year ago, and I don't have the details exactly correct, but about a year ago, there was a series of protests. Well, they said this. First of all, the anti-racism protests, the protests that issued from the death of George Floyd, they should not be confused with a permissive stance on all gatherings. Of course, the protests against racism and against the death of George Floyd are totally justifiable under our sincerely objective public health rubrics. But protests against stay-at-home orders are rooted in white nationalism. Now, this is 1,200 of our leading public health authorities all across this country. Now think for a second about all of the ways in which our universities transmit not knowledge and not truth, but deceit and lies. About 18 or so months ago, I don't remember the exact date, ladies and gentlemen, the universities do not pursue knowledge and truth, they pursue deceit and lies, and it's time to be honest about that fact. Now, we could go issue by issue, example by example. I've recently become obsessed. I'm an alumnus of Yale Law School at the ridiculous, thank you, boo. The simple fact is that our universities tell the powerful what they want to hear, and they couch it in ridiculous political rhetoric instead of dealing with the real consequences of progressive policy. This is the world that we live in. And I hate to say, this is the world created by universities that care more about fake culture wars. Right now, in American schools, there are millions of children who are learning about the fundamental evil of American slavery and America's racist past. And of course, we have a complicated past, and there are a lot of sins that we have to atone for. And that is the ideology that is reinforced, that is given legitimacy, and that is taught at our universities. Why, ladies and gentlemen, are school children learning from school teachers that America is a fundamentally racist and evil country? Because those same school teachers learned it from some progressive professor at a university 10 or 15 years ago. That is the fundamental problem of American truth and knowledge today. And in our own ways, all of us reinforce the power of universities to control our lives and control how we live them. And I was talking with a person about how ridiculous is it that we tell our young people to go to college, to get brainwashed, to acquire $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 of student debt just to be able to live a normal life in their own country. And he said, well, what's the alternative? The donor at this meeting, a politically aligned person, a person who's supporting my campaign said, well, what's the alternative? I don't want my kid to become an HVAC specialist. But if that's your attitude, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to continue to empower the colleges and the universities that make it impossible for conservative ideas to ultimately carry the day. We have got to get out of the mindset that the only way to live a good life in this country, the only way for our children to succeed, is to go to a four-year university where people will learn to hate their country and acquire a lot of debt in the process. And the person whose quote I ultimately had to land on was the great prophet and statesman Richard Milhouse Nixon. And I have to say, before I get to this, that we are celebrating today the birthday of Pat Buchanan, who first got a start in the Nixon administration, and I think is the genesis of many of the ideas that we discussed here and have discussed here over the past few days. But Richard Nixon, not known for his inspirational quotes, and I'm not going to lie to you, I'm not going to offer you an inspirational quote tonight. I'm going to offer you a true quote, because there is a season for everything in this country. And I think in this movement of national conservatism, what we need more than inspiration is we need wisdom. And there was a wisdom in what Richard Nixon said approximately 40, 50 years ago. He said, and I quote, "The professors are the enemy." Is somehow fundamentally flawed in a way that's unique in American political history. It's that Trump is a really bad candidate, and frankly, I think a really bad person.
You've said, I'm a never Trump guy, never liked him, terrible candidate, idiot if you voted for him, might be America's Hitler, might be a cynical a-hole, cultural heroine, noxious and reprehensible.
I was wrong about Donald Trump. I didn't think he was going to be a good president, Brett. He was a great president.
We have to honestly and aggressively attack the universities in this country. The professors are the enemy.
We will see you there.